Good evening. I'm Dr. Tracy Steady Hardcastle, and I'm so excited to have you all here at this webinar tonight, where we are going to be talking about fasting and genetics and how they intermingle. One thing that's going to be a little bit different tonight is that we're going to go over the poll questions after my guest has done her full presentation. So I'm not going to forget, but I wanted to let all of you know that that will be postponed a little bit. So this is very exciting because we're combining the power of fasting mimicking nutrition, which is a little bit hard to say, with personalized genetics. So this webinar explores why fasting feels easier for some people than for others. It's never probably 100% easy, but for some people it is easier, and how genetics help explain these differences. But first, I'm very excited to introduce Ashley from L-Nutra to present the science behind fasting mimicking diets. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you, Dr. Steady. It is a pleasure to be here with you this evening and all of you, in fact, to talk a little bit about how we use the fasting mimicking diet to improve your metabolic health. So is it all right, Dr. Steady, if I go ahead and share my screen and slides and we'll jump right in?
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Bear with me just a moment. I'll open this up and we'll get going here. So, all
And
right.
got it.
Perfect. Dr. Steady, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, I'm here to talk a little bit about fasting biology to food as medicine, because that really is what fasting mimicking nutrition, as you said, Dr. Steady, is, how it can be used as a tool to improve your metabolic health. Uh, so I'm Ashley Bazell. I'm a dietitian. I'm also a diabetes educator, but I'm the director of clinical nutrition and global training at L-Nutra Health. And we can see here, L-Nutra is our global company, Proline, our consumer division, L-Nutra Health, where we have some specialized programs too using the fasting mimicking diet. So let's talk a little bit about our company, and then we'll jump into what makes us so unique and the science behind us. L-Nutra Health is the first Nutritech company to enhance human longevity and remit chronic diseases. In fact, we have over 42 plus clinical trials, over 130 patents, products that are created to help reduce bioage, which we'll talk a little bit more, products that are there to help prevent, reduce, take you off of medication from diabetes, which we have really, really promising both research studies and real world results. Known to be safe in over 1 million users, and we've had 25 years of research with NIH funding. So lots and lots of science, which you can even see here. I'm always proud to share this slide to show you all the different global partnerships we have with universities across the world, and have been published in many top-tier medical journals, not just in metabolic health, but also in cancer and in autoimmune disease, and just lots of exciting things going on here with the cellular cleanup. So let's talk about how the fasting mimicking diet can help you in your metabolic health. I like to say this is kind of our philosophy, so to speak. We want to treat the root causes of chronic disease. In fact, sometimes I will say this is kind of how we feel we're turning sick care into health care. As you know, polypharmacy is such a huge issue across the world, especially in the US. And there's a lifelong dependence on medications that help treat symptoms, and not all medications are bad. We need them. But if there is a way that we can treat treat root causes, not treat just symptoms, we can alleviate some of that burden, financial burden, the daily burden of having to take medication, timing, et cetera, so that we can help optimize your health. So let's talk about why people fast in the first place. It's part kind of evolutionary history, and we may even associate it with religion. But for many of our ancestors, there wasn't a choice. There was famine, there was lack of food, no access, and just had to fast. And water was all that was available. So it's just part of kind of tradition, and our bodies are incredible in the way that they can adapt, and they know how to survive in those types of periods. In fact, over the years, there's been a lot of research showing the benefits of prolonged water fasting and how it can impact the body with cellular rejuvenation and renewal. But we live in the day and age of DoorDash, 24/7 access to food and our fridges and our pantries, drive-throughs, et cetera, that we rarely ever give ourselves our body time to rest and ever to fast as well. So the benefit of fasting when we get into a prolonged fasting, and I'm not talking about intermittent fasting, there are benefits to both. So when we intermittent fast, I like to think of that as kind of a short-term fasting. And that might be something like a 5-2. If you think about your week, maybe you take 2 days a week that you fast, the other 5 days you eat normally. Maybe it's a 12-12, a circadian fast, or maybe you try to have all of your eating within an 8-hour window. There are benefits to intermittent fasting, metabolic benefits, weight loss benefits, but it's the prolonged fasting, something greater than 48 hours. That is where we see the cellular impact, the disease reduction, improvement in gut microbiota, improvement in inflammation. And that is because a prolonged fast allows your body to get into autophagy. You see here this kind of fancy word you may or may not have heard of. If I were to draw a line straight between that O and the P in that word, auto meaning self, phagy meaning eat. It's our body's way of cleaning house. It's our own kind of recycling mechanism that our bodies know how to do. We just don't give it the opportunity to do that. And what is happening in autophagy is really when our body has this accumulation of worn out kind of cellular components, misfolded proteins, mitochondria that's not quite right. And our body can go in and use that kind of self-clean, replace those old parts with new parts. And as I mentioned, by doing so, it helps to reduce that inflammation, helps to improve insulin resistance, and that's when cellular rejuvenation and renewal occur. Here's a more scientific image of autophagy. But how it works is when you're not getting adequate nutrients, then or adequate nutrition in general, or you're just having water, say, then we're not triggering these nutrient sensing pathways. Our bodies have these pathways. IGF-1 is one, mTOR, PKA, that tell our cells what to do, how to repair, how to grow, how to use energy, etc. But when we don't trigger those, kind of downregulate, that's when our body can rest, and that's where we see this kind of magic of autophagy occur. In fact, in 2016, the Nobel Prize was awarded to Yoshinori Yasumi for the mechanism of autophagy. So it has a tremendous effect on the body, and it doesn't just impact your metabolic health, but a whole body cellular health. Every organ, in fact, in the body is impacted. So what is the fasting mimicking diet? You might be familiar with the word Prolon. That is our consumer division that you can go and get a fasting mimicking diet kit. And so it is nourishment. A lot of people think about us as being a fasting company, but I prefer to refer to us as a nourishing company because we are giving you nourishment with the benefits of a prolonged fast. And it's real food. As you can see here in this image, there are soups, there are herbal teas that we send, there are fantastic olives, I have to say. There's a Choco Crisp bar, there's almond kale crisp, there's a honey nut bar. You get food throughout the day that's, it's set up kind of like meals. So you have a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, snack. So it feels very easy to do and follow, and takes away some of the safety concerns that you might have with a prolonged fast. It's been demonstrated to be safe and well over, in fact, this slide is a little old, well over 1 million users. But it's very specifically formulated, specific macronutrients, not about the calories necessary as you might think. It's the specific macronutrients to not trigger those nutrient sensing pathways that I showed you in the slide before. And that still may seem like, gosh, I still don't get it. How does your body know you're not eating when you're giving it food? Well, if you look at this image here on the left, this empty plate, if you're fasting with water, you see in the middle, you're not triggering those nutrient sensing pathways. Your body goes into that intracellular cleanup. But same with this nourished fast. This is what the fasting mimicking diet kit looks like. You get a nice box, and then you have each day and everything you need to eat within each day. It's really easy to follow, but you get just enough right here, as you see in the center, where you're flying under the radar. Your body doesn't realize that it's eating, and it can go into that intracellular cleanup. In fact, this is really exciting. This was just published in Geroscience in December, the first study of autophagy, a human study, validating our research that we had in animal models that autophagy begins on day 3. So when you go through the fast, each day there's really a specific kind of thing that's going on in your body, which we'll dive into. But this study showed day 3 is when that autophagy begins. It can vary a little bit person to person based on body composition, but then we allow for a couple of extra days of the fasting. And the studies even show that sometimes even a day or two beyond that, the autophagy continues, even once you start the refeeding process. So really exciting news, validating our science. So in this journey, this 5-day journey, you can see there on day 1, it's really the fasting day, your transition day. In fact, it's where your body goes from burning glucose is the main source of fuel. That's our brain's preferred source of fuel, to burning fat on days 2. It's kind of flipping gears there from burning glucose to burning fat, ketones, the fatty acids. And even though you're in a state of ketosis, a mild state of ketosis during this 5-day journey, it's not the point. It's not the purpose. The purpose is really autophagy. And as I mentioned a minute ago, that begins on day 3. And then we allow for those couple other days that cellular rejuvenation and renewal to occur. Oddly enough, when you get through that day 3, which for me personally is one of the harder days, but I have nourishment, I can make it through. Day 4 and 5 are so much easier. It's amazing. Dr. Steady, we'll have to chat about this a little later in your experience too, but that is kind of how it happens for most people. Kind of textbook is that at the end, you're just feeling more rejuvenated. You tend to just have more energy. In fact, I always try to take advantage of that. And then day 6, I don't want to forget to mention day 6. That's the day you begin eating again. That's equally as important. A lot of people don't realize that. They think all of the magic is in the 5 days of the fast. Fasting really initiates autophagy, but it's the refeeding that completes it. And so I want you to think about your cells as sponges, and on that day 5, they are ready to absorb nutrients. You've completely wrung them out. So we want on that day 6 to fuel with good foods. Less processed foods, less sugar, really focus on, berries and quinoa and avocados and maybe some low mercury fish like salmon and a lot of roasted vegetables. Lots of color is really, really important to fuel those cells with good nutrients at the end. So I love that. If you don't take a ton away from what I present today, know that this can have a cellular impact and that fasting initiates autophagy and refeeding completes it. This is a really cool study and something that you all will have the ability to be able to see for yourselves, which I'm really excited for Dr. Steady to tell us a little bit more too about this. But we had a study published in Nature Communications, I think in spring of 2024, that showed just 3 cycles of the fasting mimicking diet reduced biological age by 2.5 years. Biological age, not chronological age, but the age of your cells. Your cells became more youthful by 2.5 years just from 3 cycles of fasting in the calendar year. That's a huge impact on your ability to fight disease and to feel better and feel stronger. We're looking to help increase health span so that you can have the energy to do the things that you want to do for longer. In fact, you can see there in this slide an 11 years bio age reversal over 20-year period. So 3 cycles a year, which is really exciting that you can be empowered and have that impact over your own health. One thing I want to point out, because there are so many different ways that people are trying to optimize their metabolic health, is that when we lose weight, a lot of times people lose muscle mass and fat. But the fasting mimicking diet research shows that there's a protective mechanism to preserve muscle mass. So I want to point out this study to you in NPJ, Metabolic Health and Disease, comparing the fasting mimicking diet with the Mediterranean diet. And in this population of people, they had obesity, high blood pressure, but they did 4 monthly cycles of the fasting mimicking diet versus the daily Mediterranean diet. So 120 days of effort for the Mediterranean diet and just 20 days of effort, because you're doing a 5-day fast each month for 4 months. So just 20 days. And what we found were similar reductions in weight, waist size, body fat, cholesterol, other cardiometabolic risk factors. But the FMD group, the fasting mimicking diet group, preserved lean body mass. The Mediterranean group didn't. In fact, it was about 3 pounds of muscle preservation, the difference in these two groups. I want you to think about going to the grocery store. If you pick up a pound of ground beef, think of 3 of those over a 4-month period. That's a significant amount of muscle loss that can occur. And it is hard to build muscle as we age, especially as we age, because we begin after the age of 65 losing that muscle mass at a more rapid rate. So that's a really unique component to the fasting mimicking diet. And really why that is because as you go through the fast, our bodies get into fat burning mode. The Nutri technology allows your body to still get just this little bit of glucose each day, a little bit of glycerol each day to help send a signal to the brain to protect that muscle. And then there's some stem cell regeneration that occurs at the end of the fast. And that's all this protective mechanism, because the goal really is to help you drive visceral fat, the fat that we hold around our middle down, but preserve your muscle mass. And that will help you feel longer, stronger, and be healthier too. This is a fantastic image. It's an MRI. I'll orient you just a little bit, showing the visceral and liver fat reduction in the preservation of muscle mass. So looking at this image, the green area, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the green is the visceral fat. This kind of burgundy color that's surrounding that visceral fat is muscle. And then surrounding that in the kind of purplish blue color is subcutaneous fat. So this is a transverse cut. Imagine that we've cut right across kind of where your umbilical is, the umbilical area, and we're looking up into the abdominal cavity. This is your spine here in the back, this kind of gray area. But look at baseline. In this study, they did 12 cycles of fasting, so a 5-day period each month for 12 months. Baseline, look here at 6 months. And then again at 12 months. I mean, it looks like the belt, the belt size has just continued to decrease. In fact, it almost looks like an adult and a child in comparison, but there's preservation of this muscle mass. And that's really, really important. The visceral fat is the more dangerous fat that surrounds our organs, that can cause a lot of challenges for our body and insulin resistance and inflammation. So we want to reduce that. And this is a great way that you can reduce that overall visceral fat in your body. This image, I like to call this the blue man. It could be the blue woman here, but showing all the different impact that doing the fasting mimicking diet and autophagy can have on your body. We have studies. You can see the links to each of those here in this image. But when we go through a fast, there's improvement kind of in neuroinflammation, improvement even in your relationship to food too. You realize during those 5 days, I don't need all the same foods that I thought I did. That afternoon Diet Coke and crackers, your body's able to flex, and you can feel more confident in your ability to have control over your food intake. There's improvement in chemosensory, which is really interesting. People that have obesity tend to have less ability to smell. So that is what that is. Those chemosensory organs is the ability to taste and smell is improved with repetitive cycles of fasting. Of course, there's improvement in cardiometabolic risk factors, the preservation of muscle mass, which I talked about. There's even promotion of beta cell function in animal models, showing improvement in diabetes and reversal even. And I've had many members that have been able to come off of medication that have been on medication for 5, 10 years or so. Of course, lowering biological age, improving your gut health, which is a huge component to your immunity, restoring renal function, so lower microalbuminuria from repetitive cycles of the fasting, reducing liver fat. This is really exciting. Even we have, liver transplant centers across the country use the fasting mimicking diet in people that are about to do a liver transplant to optimize the health of the liver, which is really cool. And then enhancing skin texture. There's some studies side to side where you can look at the skin and there's less fine lines and wrinkles because the hydration of the cell is improved. So as you see, it is a whole body impact that you can have from one thing. I can't even think of one pill that can do all of these things like this food as medicine tool can do for your body. So I would encourage you to fast. I hope you can get that enthusiasm for me and all the reasons why it's really important. Dr. Steady, I want to hand it over to you now. I'm going to stop sharing so that you can talk to us a little bit more about how these listeners can incorporate this into their routine.
Absolutely. So we are offering for a short time only a bundle where you can get 2 of our de-aging tests for $100 off each. So that's $399 instead of $499, plus do 3 months of the fast mimicking diet. You have 2 options if you're within the United States. If you're within the US, you have a choice between doing a regular one, which has powdered soups, but they're still good. Or you can do the next gen, which is pre-made soups for you. So it's a heavier box, and so there's more water in it because it's already constituted. But it does, in my opinion, those are tastier. so but not everybody wants to do that. Some people would rather heat it up on the stove themselves and add water and all of that. And also there's a price differential. So we do have the 2 options, and we're going to put a link to both of the options into the chat. We're offering, as I said, the $399 for our de-aging kits, and then the cost per kit for the Prolon kits is either $129 for the powdered or $179 for the next gen pre-made. This is a really good deal on both things, quite honestly. And it's very exciting because I'm really excited. I'm totally doing this, and I will be talking about how it's going. Because being able to see for myself a change from doing it, I think is really inspiring, because we can know what's happening because someone tells us that, autophagy is happening and we're making ourselves younger and healthier. But to really be able to see it, the de-aging premium test, it shows how things are happening in different organs. So you can actually watch various organs drop in age. I'm very excited, as you can probably tell. So those links are in the chat for you. We will put them in the chat a few times throughout the course of the evening. I really hope that all of you are going to do this with me. Several of us from the company are going to do it. We're going to be posting about it. And L-Nutra is going to have a WhatsApp group just for DNA company participants, where you can ask them questions and they can encourage you and answer all of your questions. So, and there's also a feeling of community, I think, about doing it all together. Not only because the complaining together can be more fun, but also being proud of ourselves is more fun in community. I think we did it, guys. When we get to the end of that 5 days. So that's my spiel on that. With no further ado, let's quickly go through the poll questions so that I don't forget. And I already have a couple of questions for Ashley. Okay. So our first question was about challenges with fasting? Because probably a lot of people, how many of you type a one in the chat if you've tried fasting before and type a two in the chat, please, if you have never tried fasting before. But the biggest challenge that people seem to report is hunger and low energy. And some people, you know, 24%, it's all of the above, moodiness and irritability and cravings and all of the things. So it sounds like quite a few people have some issues with the process. And I wonder if it's because they're trying to do a water fast or a bone broth fast or something that is really very restrictive. We've got a lot of ones. We've got a lot of experienced fasters in
See
here.
that. It's exciting.
Wow. And some twos, and that's okay because you're going to get your opportunity. Okay. Our next question is about how important genetics could be in fasting success. And our audience thinks it's pretty important or somewhat important, but they're our audience. They know what's up because they know how important genetics are, as do we. Does caffeine hurt or help or hurt your fasting? And we're definitely going to talk about caffeine. I do have a question for Ashley about that. And almost half of you are not sure. And so it's really good that we have Ashley here to talk about that. We're going to talk about caffeine and exercise and things like that as we go along. Do you feel you have stronger cravings than most people? And, you know, we've got a lot of sometimes and a lot of not really. So maybe you've never tried doing it with a group before and you only have yourselves and, maybe an online community to talk to, but you're not doing it together at the same time, right? It was, because the season can make a difference, how well you're sleeping, things like that. So some people find it easier to do things like this at different times of the year. So, and what fasting questions are you hoping to get answered today? How to improve weight loss and how to personalize fasting. So I think that they're probably interested in how the genetics are going to dictate response to a certain degree. Now, while no one gene ever dictates anything about us, because we are such a wonderful combination of many genes. Oh, yes, that's right. We were asking if you had found it helpful or not, but I went off on a tangent because you can all actually see the poll questions, and which I didn't know for a long time, and I got very excited about asking Ashley about caffeine with Prolon specifically. So you answered the question properly. I just kind of went rogue a little bit there. Okay, so let's talk about when we're talking about fasting. It's not just about willpower, it's biology. But in your presentation, Ashley, one of the things that I saw on one of your slides was it was under the day six refeed, which was about the
Mhm.
emotional and physiological impact of the fast lasting beyond the 5 days. People don't often talk about the emotional impact of fasting. And I just wondered quickly before I go off, what that was all about.
That's a great question. I think when we say the emotional impact, people are surprised that they don't need as much food as they realize. We're creatures of habit. We tend to kind of eat around the same times each day, the same amounts of foods. A lot of us are emotional eaters. But when we have that very kind of tight amount of calories each day and our bodies are able to make it through, I think there's something about that that's really empowering. Like, gosh, I feel like I have a little bit more control. I feel like I can, and not to mention, I mean, we're we're not having as much carbohydrate, so there's not so much variance in the day to day, maybe sugar because it's plant based. It's dairy free, gluten free. There's a lot of just kind of it's tightly controlled. So we don't have maybe some of those swings, mood swings that we might have based on the foods we consume. But I think people also leave the fast feeling like they have invested that time in themselves and in their health, and they want to eat better. And so not that anyone expects you to be a saint every day, but I think it helps you feel more empowered, and then you want to fuel with good food because you felt good throughout the fast. And over time, you see these results in your body composition changing.
And I think that it also kind of helps to override the voice that tells us that we don't have a
Mm.
choice, right? When once making it
Mhm.
through that, I have heard people report that they think, okay, I know that I can do that. And so I can say yes to the things that I want to say yes to, right? As opposed to maybe the things that they don't really want to. And I definitely have friends and patients who will say, is it time for a Prolon reset? You know what I mean? Because they just feel ready to
Mhm.
like they're like, I've reached a point now where I know that I need to kind of reset the system, and that seems like to work for them as a way to do it. I want to be clear about something really quickly, which is that um, when we're selling this bundle, it's not just Prolon or just the tests. It's actually um, everything all together. So it's because we want you to test in the beginning, do the 3 months, and then test at the end to see your age drop. So I just wanted to be clear about that. I wasn't clear about that before. All right, so let's talk about a few genes um, and how they can influence things like hunger and cravings and energy stability. So many of you are familiar with FTO, which helps control fullness signals, and appetite driven energy intake. And what that means is if we feel hungry, we want to eat. That's why we have hunger cues, is so that we live because we need food in order to survive. So, but then there are supposed to be these other signals that tell us, put on the brakes. That's probably enough. I need to digest that and utilize it, and then I can take in some more. So some people's genes are are not as optimal as other people's for this. And so they have a harder time telling when they're full, when it's time to stop eating. Um, interestingly, and there's also can be more of a drive toward energy dense or ultra processed foods. So things that are more filled with sugar, more filled with fat, or ultra processed. Those ultra processed foods are tricky. Um, the great thing about this is that physical activity helps to balance this out. But already I'm about to ask Ashley another question, which is you can't do vigorous exercise while you're on the 5 day fast. So we wouldn't necessarily be able to use vigorous activity to help people with a suboptimal gene for FTO. What can they do? And why can't people? I know that I definitely had this question my first time. I was like, why can't I exercise the way that I usually do?
It's a great question, and it's something because exercise helps us with stress management, it helps us with sleep. There's so many things. So you don't have to give up exercise, but the vigorous word is important. So when we're doing anything too strenuous, let's say a HIIT workout, for instance, or like a marathon, it raises your energy demand. So, one, it's going to make doing the fast more difficult because you're going to be hungrier. But there also is a raise in the cortisol, the stress hormones. And that can also, trigger you out of a fast when we raise some of those hormones. And so it's just not an ideal time to do anything really intense. For those of you that like to strength train, which I would so encourage outside of the 5 days, you don't need to strength train during this week. There's no reason to. You can't build muscle because you're in a negative nitrogen balance. So it's best this week to walk, stretch, do light yoga to help you, just kind of one, be kind of not entertained, so to speak, but just to kind of help manage your day to day to keep you occupied. That's the word I was looking for. But those things are really helpful to do during the fast, but just nothing strenuous. So, and just for safety concerns, you could have increased muscle breakdown during rigorous exercise and not have the nutrients you need for the recovery because we do get protein, we do get some carbohydrate, but the fasting mimicking diet is predominantly plant-based fats. So just gentle movement is what I would encourage, Dr. Steady.
Yeah, I love walking. You know, during a fast because it doesn't feel um like too much. And I don't,
Mhm.
not a good time to bike ride in case you get dizzy, for instance. You know what I
Right.
mean? So safety, I love that you mentioned safety. That is really important. Thank you so much, Ashley.
No, you're welcome.
So the next gene that I would like to talk about is MC4R. And this has more to do with cravings and rewards. It's one of the master regulators of feeling full again. Not the only one. So like I said before, we're a mixture of all of our genes. So with a suboptimal presentation, once again, can't really tell when you're full or um, when you're it's more of you can't physically feel it almost until it's too late. So the brain receives weaker "I'm full" signals even after you've had enough food. And the way that I wanted to the kind of compare this to is, so I have a car that if I always put on my seatbelt, but if for some reason I didn't or a passenger didn't, the beeping starts out kind of quiet. And if I start to drive a little faster, the beeping gets louder and louder and louder until, if it's a passenger and they don't have their seatbelt on, you turn to them and you're like, you really need to put your seatbelt on before you drive me crazy. So with this, if someone's MC4R is a little bit suboptimal, the seatbelt dinging just stays at that quiet level. And it doesn't kick in to be like, okay, it's time to stop, right? Until perhaps you're more full than you want to be. So and there's more snacking um, with the MC4R suboptimal presentation. So environmental cues are huge here. Using a smaller plate so that it looks like more, getting, more of those senses involved, really smelling your food, taking your time, chewing, things like that. I mean, things we should probably all do anyway, like chew our food a bunch of times. And also paying attention to what food is already in the house. Now, the great thing about doing fasting mimicking diet is you don't have a choice about, about what food you're eating because it's all there for you, which is a relief from mental load. A lot of people that I know, one of the things that they look forward to about it is they don't have to think what's for dinner. They know exactly what's for dinner. It's going to be soup and something else. And that makes them happy because they can just relax. Um, so, previous to fasting, um, one with this gene might want, or suboptimal gene, might want to structure your eating windows. This is when I eat. These are the number of hours that I eat within. And before doing the fast, maybe avoid ultra palatable foods so that it's not such a bumpy road. If you've kind of weaned yourself off of some of the more energy dense, super processed things, which you will then have a choice about whether to go back to afterward. Um, that might make the ride a little bit smoother when you're first starting to fast. I actually find day two. You said day three, Ashley. I find day two to be trickier because it's the steep. Day
Mhm.
one, you're like, oh, this is easy. This is no problem. And
More
day two,
food than I need.
right, exactly. And then day two is like, oh, okay, all right,
Mhm.
that's fine. So by day three, at least I feel like I know what I'm expecting, and I can get through that. But really, once you get through day three, and you've just got those 2 days to go, it gets a lot easier. Okay, so now we're going to move into some new genes. So you won't necessarily see these in your app because your test results haven't come back yet. So a good one to open if you're looking for something to open up in your app, if you're looking for a report to look at, might be either the other diet nutrition profile or your mood and behavior, because mood and behavior also really influences how easy or difficult these things can be. Um, so LEPR reduces leptin signaling efficiency. So leptin is a hormone that helps tell the brain um, that it has enough fat and energy stored. It's sort of like how people who live near a train report not hearing it anymore. And so if you have enough, then you hear the train. And if you have like more of a leptin resistance picture, um, people who live by trains do report not hearing it anymore. And I've heard and this is hard for me to believe, that people report the same thing about the roosters in some places in Puerto Rico, which is hard for me to imagine because, or people, I love Puerto Rico, but I did have a little bit of trouble sleeping. Parents might not notice the happy shrieks of their kids, only the alarming ones, but someone unused to children might notice all of the shrieks and find them all alarming. Like, is everything okay over there? So in this case, it's the I'm full signal that gets disrupted, as well as energy expenditure cues, how we use the energy we have versus sending out signals of needing more fuel. How much energy do we have access to, and how do I go about using that? It's like the gas gauge is a little bit broken in the car. How do we know when we need to refuel if the gauge is broken? So people with suboptimal profiles can have a tendency toward a higher BMI, higher fasting insulin, and higher triglycerides, and a higher waist circumference. So, do you remember the pictures that Ashley showed of the waist and the visceral fat that can be part of this picture? So, now resistance training is particularly helpful, but not during your fast. You have to wait, and you can do it before and you can do it after, just not during. The next gene that we're going to talk about is SH2B1, which enhances signaling from leptin and insulin. And if it's suboptimal, you can have an increased appetite, increased insulin resistance, increased stress makes it worse. So, this is why I said you may want to bust out your mood and behavior report. And we're not going to go over new genes in there. We're just going to go over the ones that you may be already familiar with. Our good friends, ADRA2B and COMT. So, as you probably remember, ADRA2B is involved in shutting down the receptors for the stress hormone norepinephrine or noradrenaline. And so, if you have a deletion here, then you'll see these, and they're listed as I think this is the one that's 2 or 1 or nothing. So this is a copy number. Anyway, if it's suboptimal, you will not shut that mechanism off, and more of that stress hormone can stay in the synapse and affect you. And if your COMT is slow, then you're not clearing it as quickly. So then it's staying there even longer. So when we're thinking about those, that people with that presentation might struggle more with this if they also have a suboptimal leptin gene. So this is another situation where the environment really matters, where we want to pay attention and do stress relieving techniques. Meditation, breathing, taking walks. Sometimes the other thing about a walk is that it takes you out of the place where you physically are, and that can make you feel like something is different in your headspace. You're not just looking at your head. You walk to a different room, walk down the street a little bit, and suddenly things feel more opened up. And so if you're feeling hungry when you're having a fast and your stress levels are really high, doing some things to reduce your stress that don't involve food, and this is where we're going to have to get creative. So I just mentioned some meditation, breathing, taking walks. Ashley, do you have any others that you typically recommend to people who are struggling with managing their stress without the crutch of food, which many people
Sure.
use?
Sure. No, absolutely. I mean, you hit a lot of the great ones. I love that kind of taking yourself out of the environment. And my preferred is outside too, just to like, okay, just change my scenery. Sometimes I like to tell people just take drink a glass of water, a small glass of water, and set a time and just say, let's see how I feel in 10 minutes, 12 minutes. And it's okay to listen to your body. If you have kind of done a few things and realize like, no, I'm truly hungry, then it's okay to eat. But I think it's helpful if that's something that you feel like, gosh, I feel this food noise all the time. It's impacting my day to day. Have a couple of things that you kind of put in your hunger toolbox to do. Like maybe it's calling a friend and then seeing if you're still hungry afterwards, going on that walk, a little meditation, a gratitude type of journaling. Sometimes those types of things are helpful a good book to just distract you a little bit, and then evaluate, is it something that I really need? Or reframe. What will this food do for my body today? How does it impact me? So some of those are some of the techniques that I'll encourage people to use to help determine that kind of hunger fullness, looking at those cues.
I love that. Those are great. Um, so for those of you who are not aware, these are not in your report. Or missed it the first time I said it, but I would encourage you to get um, your enhanced kit, let's call it, for the DNA 360 during this month, because right now it's 199. If you've already tested your genes, 199 gets you the retest for an additional 85 genes. And I'm going over some of them here, and I'm so excited because the new insights are just so great and bring such depth. Our other test, the original DNA 360, also awesome, super helpful for everything. But I would recommend getting the new test. Okay, after my little advertisement for the new test, getting back to genes. Um, and the next gene is NRXN3. And this has to do with reward circuitry and addiction like behaviors. So, um, people who are more impulsive eaters, maybe doing some binging, you know, people with a suboptimal gene here will have a greater vulnerability to overeating. Um, this can be especially difficult, once again, with hyperpalatable foods during high stress states, and there can be some binging, but not from a lack of hunger cues. Here, it wouldn't necessarily be, I don't know when I'm full. It's more from thinking, oh, I can have just one more of those, or from mindless eating as a stress mechanism. So, Ashley, I have a question for you, which I also
Okay.
have some ideas about. If people are used to using food as a reward, um,
Mhm.
and sometimes this can get set up in childhood, like if you don't cry at the doctor, I'll give you a lollipop or something. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like these kinds of things can be really, really old behaviors that we associate with. Um, I've had a really long day. I deserve to feel good. I deserve this food. I deserve this treat, whatever the thing is. And I'm not saying that that's not true. I'm sure all of you out there work really hard and you do deserve a reward. Um, but if it can't be food, what else can they use during a fast to get that same dopamine sort of lift? And I have some ideas, but I went first, so this time you get to go first, and I get
Okay.
and then I get to
Okay.
piggyback.
Sure, sure. It feels almost like human nature to have food be a reward. I think because food is such an integral part of kind of our lives and social and I'm guilty of, even with my own children. We used to do this thing years ago when they were in elementary school with like Friday treat after school on Fridays. We made it through the week. Let's go get something. But then it occurred to me like, am I setting them up to think that, you just in the moment, you don't think of it that way, but it can have that impact long term. And I know that because I talk to so many people all the time that talk about where their struggles began with food. And it oftentimes is in childhood, or they were forced to clean their plate or things like that. So I think it's nice to focus on a couple of non-food rewards, and maybe that's something that continues on in a behavior that you want to do. So maybe it's like, I will, if I do this, I'll reward myself with a new pair of exercise shoes, or I'll go on a new hike and explore something different, or finding some non-food things to look forward to. Or I'm gonna go out on this walk and listen to this particular podcast because I love hearing what they say. It's motivating. Things that you can do to just um, reward yourself, but with something that maybe continues good habits for yourself. So, or an exercise class, like a class pass, something that kind of continues on in a good direction for you long term.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's interesting because I think a lot of the other things that we do as reward or at the end of the day, we associate with food. Like
Hmm.
a lot of people may watch television in front of or what eat while watch in front of the television or something like that. And so that can
Mindless
become
eating.
right, right. And but there's a that you can still eat your Prolon stuff in front of the TV if you want to. But then when that's done, maybe it's I get to hold someone's hand, or I get to um, use that new hairbrush to really like brush out my hair before I go to bed, or I'm gonna put it's winter. I'm gonna put lotion on, not just in the morning after my shower, but also before bed because I deserve that self-care moment. I'm gonna give myself a foot massage, something that one of the reasons that I'm bringing those up is because those can stimulate also oxytocin, and like our bodies are doing the work during this fast, and so giving them a little bit of extra love in a different way can feel really, really good. If you have a partner or with yourself, you can also engage in sexual behavior that is not banned during fasting. You can go ahead. I mean, I guess unless anyway, yes, you can feel free to do that. And so that's also another uh could be another reward. It could even be bragging to a friend about something because this dopamine is also accomplishments can help also with this. So if you accomplish something that you didn't really want to do before, I cleaned out my whole pantry. And you can feel good about that, but you might feel better about it. My stepmom actually sends us pictures of different things that she's like, I've really got to get to that task. She sends it to the whole family group chat. And then she gets to feel celebrated for accomplishing something. And so we can use those kinds of things also to stimulate that dopamine in our systems because it's that's a reward also. Um, Even volunteering someplace and doing something kind for someone else, bringing a neighbor their newspaper. I don't know. I'm just making things up now, but doing something that can make us feel good about ourselves is another way of making that happen. Okay, so we already mentioned COMT in the context of clearing out stress hormones. It also clears out dopamine. So how fast or slow your COMT is will also impact these behaviors that have to do with impulse control, addiction, and um, and how long that feeling of reward stays in your body. So just being aware of that in your mood and behavior profile. You may need to clean out a lot of pantries if that's if that's what you choose. If you clear the dopamine out quickly, and let's say that you're slow, your DRD2, if you don't have dense numbers of receptors, then you may not be binding to as much, and so with a fast compt, that might mean that pleasure doesn't stick with you for that long. So having awareness of that, it can be really helpful here. And then I just want to talk quickly, because I'm running out of time, about carb sensitivity. So if you have suboptimal AME1, um, you may be more prone to blood sugar crashes and feel more shaky or irritable on different types of fasts. And that should happen less with Prolon because you get meals, but you also get snacks. But for I'm just talking about fasting in general. That can be something that sometimes people have noticed, and that's part of that. People were worried about their energy crashes, and so that's where the macros for the fasting mimicking diet are also really important for kind of maintaining that blood sugar. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say about that, or do you have anything to add to that?
Sure, sure, absolutely. So, because the macronutrients, the way they're distributed, it is a lower carbohydrate, lower protein, higher fat, plant-based fat content to the anti-inflammatory fat during those 5 days. It's a nice, consistent kind of release of carbohydrate throughout the body. In fact, I work in L Nutra Health where we use cycles of fasting for improving metabolic health, but also another division specifically for diabetes. So people that have more insulin resistance and they have CGMs, and we look at that data together. It is amazing because during that fast, a lot of times they have to come off of hypoglycemic agents. that they can maintain within a nice, healthy range all day long without that medicine, but eating. I think they're even surprised. So it's giving you enough so that you have energy, you can do the things that you need to do, but not too much. And so it's this nice kind of steady. In fact, the waves are to me beautiful because I like to look at those all the time. It's not these huge peaks and valleys that a lot of times that you see when somebody's all over the place with the types of foods that they're eating. So it's nice and steady, which I think is really helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're at the top of the hour, so it's about time for us to start our Q&A questions. But do you have any final uh, thoughts before we get into people's questions that you would like to offer?
I would say for anybody that's listening that's never tried anything like this before and you're a little nervous, I mean, I could not do a water fast. I'm just probably not mentally strong enough to do that. You do get food every day. As I mentioned, it's real food and it takes away a lot of safety concerns that you might have if you were doing a water fast only, like gallstones, because if you're having straight water, you're not stimulating the gallbladder. Takes away some of the low blood sugar, the hypotension that you might be concerned about, or muscle loss, nutrient deficiencies, because you're still getting those. You're getting real food. We send you kind of it's called an NR1, but it's a micronutrient replacement. So you're getting a nourished fast, and I would encourage you to try it. I mean, with all the benefits, besides just bio age, all the metabolic benefits are worth it.
Thank you so much. Um, the de-aging premium, one of the things that I is really great about it is that it can tell you pretty specifically about the aging of different systems in your body and then give you practical, because that's what we're all about here at the DNA company, right? Is practical things that you can do something about, not just testing and then being like, "Oh, I'm almost 50, but it says I'm 73. Bummer." You know what I mean? It's like this there are things that you can do about this, such as fasting. But that's not the only recommendation that the test will give you. Um, so I think that it's really empowering to be able to see the before and after data, and that this intervention specifically, because it's well studied, is something that we feel really comfortable recommending in between people's tests. So I would encourage all of you to take advantage of this, what I consider to be a really great deal on the testing and kits combo. Don't forget to also, while you're at it, go ahead and order your retest. And with that, I will start on the questions that you all have asked us. Okay, we have a question from Carla, who's asking, how do you overcome sluggish liver symptoms when fasting? I've tried fasting and end up with gallbladder and liver pain.
Hmm. Do you have sensitivities to high fat foods? Is that, I wonder if that could be a potential factor. I do know that people, and I don't know how many times you've fasted, but some people it takes a little bit of time to kind of adapt. They become more metabolically flexible after several cycles of fasting. That going from burning glucose as the main source of fuel to burning fat. Sometimes people have some challenges there. But I also will say, just from some of my own patients, that sometimes if there's challenges, they might have to take some enzymes if that's something they normally do with particular foods, and they can continue that during the fast if that's helpful for them. Because it is predominantly plant-based fat. So depending on the type of diet that you usually consume, most people are fine, but occasionally we have some people that have some sensitivities there, and but we could explore those options together. And I would encourage you to, if there's specific questions around that, you could go onto our website and there's a little kind of chat box and ask, and an FAQ too.
So that's something that's probably also worth mentioning, is that people come off of their usual supplements, not their medications, but their
Yes.
supplements during the FMD, because it can impact people's blood sugar and how they respond, and just a whole bunch of things that have to happen in order for the fast to work. But enzymes, it sounds like, are okay.
Mhm,
That's what I'm
mhm.
hearing you say.
Yes,
Okay.
that's exactly right.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Um, so we have a question from Christy. She says, I find that fasting is easy for me, but I notice that my blood pressure increases significantly while I fast. I had to stop halfway into a 3-day fast because blood pressure got dangerously high. What is causing this? And is there anything I can do to address this other than breaking my fast?
That is a great question. And it's interesting when people do the fasting mimicking diet, I see both happen. Some people have a lower blood pressure during the fast. Some people do have a little bit of a higher blood pressure during the fast. And the reason why that is because fasting is a stress on the body, just like exercise. We don't think about exercise being a stress on the body. We just think about, oh, it's good for me. I need to do it. But we're doing intense exercise, sometimes we can raise that blood pressure. So, and I'm speaking, there's a particular member of mine I'm thinking of that she deals with this also. And so typically day 2 or 3, she always has a little bit higher blood pressure. And sometimes they can be, surprisingly high, like 160s and even up to over 100. And she has worked with her cardiologist too. She's come down off of her blood pressure medication over time. So she needs less and less, but during the fast, she has to have a little bit extra, which is interesting. Another thing, this is actually a physician a member of mine, that she will dilute her soups a little bit more with a little extra water. So just a little more volume is helpful. It's not because of salt. I just want to mention that here because sometimes people think, oh, the soup's maybe salty. Sometimes people during the fast are a little more sensitive to flavors, just like salt and sweet and things like that. But there's only about 1,700 milligrams of sodium, which is actually pretty low sodium. Kind of a normal diet is probably 2,000 milligrams, maybe even up to 2,500 milligrams of salt in a day. So it is lower sodium, but for a few of my members that have had that higher blood pressure, diluting the soups can be helpful, making sure you're drinking adequate water for both for low blood pressure, but for the high also. And maybe some tailoring of that medication could be helpful.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I fall into the lower blood pressure category.
And so
Um,
for you, maybe even a little pinch of some salt in your water
yeah.
could be helpful. Just some electrolytes there, not one that has artificial flavors or sweeteners. I would discourage that. But if it's just a little pinch of salt and water, that can be really helpful.
And I do even get the extra water from adding more water. I always use like twice as much water when I do when
Just get
I,
more volume.
yeah. But this also brings me to it. I forgot to actually ask you about caffeine.
Oh,
So
yes.
could that be another way to help people with this? Because I think you're allowed 1 cup of coffee in the morning or tea, probably caffeinated tea
Mhm.
would be similar. Could someone with a little bit low blood pressure have a little bit more, and someone with higher blood pressure perhaps just skip it if they don't get a headache? Or what role does caffeine play in in the fasting mimicking
In the
diet?
fasting? That's a great question. So the good news is we're not going to take caffeine away from you. So we always tell people stick to the box, just eat what's on day one. But the exception is you can have some caffeine. And but we want to limit that, as Dr. Setti said, to 1 cup per day or about 140 milligrams of caffeine per day. So whether that's a cup of black coffee, it's important that we don't have any cream or sugar in that coffee, or if it's a cup of green tea, and you could probably have 2 to 3 cups or so of decaf coffee. Sometimes that's helpful for people that just they consume a lot of caffeine throughout the day. And so if you're one of those people, I would encourage you to kind of taper down leading into the fast so that you can handle just that 1 cup successfully. But caffeine in larger amounts than that can also, just like exercise, stimulate some like cortisol and it can kick you out of a fast. So we want you to have the best opportunity to experience the fasting results as it was studied in our research. And so we have to keep it kind of there at that minimum. So another thing too, Dr. Study, that you can do that's helpful if you're sticking to that 8 ounces is maybe have 4 ounces in the morning and then maybe 4 ounces just before lunch or just after lunch if it helps to kind of space it out a little bit. Um, But yes, so you don't have to take it away. We just have to decrease it because we want to make sure we don't, trigger stress, additional stress on the body.
Because it's already stressful. It doesn't just feel stressful. It is stressful physiologically a little bit. Not that,
It is, but that's a good thing. Not all
right.
stress is bad. Chronic stress
Exactly.
is bad, but a little bit of stress, that's why we cap it too at 5 days, is good for the body.
Yep. E- Exercise is stressful, but it's good stress once again. So it's
Hmm.
all about the temporary versus the chronic.
Yes.
Okay. Our next question is from Susan. If someone is underweight, can they do fasting other than a 12 to 14-hour overnight fast to clear out cellular debris, not to lose weight, using something like Prolon, possibly more servings, to accomplish the cellular cleanup? If not, do you have recommendations to accomplish the cellular cleanup for someone who is underweight? Um, and she's going to be hearing this on the replay, but I still wanted
Okay.
to ask it for her.
Okay. Yes. No, that's a good question. So when you go online, we don't recommend the fast for BMI of less than 18.5, because, we want to be careful. Safety is very, very important to us. Now, sometimes we'll have kind of special cases kind of between that 18.5 and 20 where we will talk with them and try to maybe reduce the length of the fast. As I mentioned, autophagy begins on day 3. So if you're looking for cellular, regeneration, renewal, we really need to get to that point. But for some people, sometimes I have had them stop after day 3, like in the morning on day 4, or maybe at the end of day 4. So we might just shorten that window of the 5-day fast. And we also want to just kind of be mindful of the way you're feeling. We want to make sure that you're not too low in energy, that you're safe. As I mentioned, you can become more metabolically flexible too over time where you feel better. But for lower body weight, that's why I would recommend, especially actually BMI under 20, I would recommend working with a professional that's comfortable in the fasting, can give you a little extra kind of guidance and tailoring there. But you could shorten that fasting window just a little bit to still get the benefits of autophagy, but maybe not as prolonged fast.
And I have some other ideas, but I wouldn't necessarily offer them in the context of a webinar, because I don't know you or anything about your health, which I'm sure everyone's sick of hearing me say. I don't know your genes, so but feel free to make an appointment because I do. There are some other things that can work in that particular situation, specifically. So
Because we do see people that have insulin resistance but low body weight. And
yes,
so um, there's still benefits.
yep, absolutely. All right. Susan is asking, pardon me, if doing Prolon monthly, is there a limit on how long you can do it? Like, I think she means how many months in a row you can do
Um,
it.
yes, I saw earlier somebody in the chat put down they've done the over 25 fast, and which is impressive. I in our program, so I can think of a member right now that's done probably 26 in a row. Now, I always, you want to have refeeding. As I mentioned, that's a really important part of fasting. And we discourage doing the fast closer together than 25 days. So after you finish that 5-day period, it's best practice to wait 25 days until you do another fast. That's kind of how we like to structure that. There's not a defined set, but we want to make sure that your muscle mass is staying strong. So if you're somebody that wants to do um, more than 12 cycles in a year, it's good to be working with a practitioner, a physician that can give you some guidance, looking at your labs to make sure everything looks within normal limits as it should be, and making sure your muscle mass is staying nice and strong. So it can be done, but a lot of times it's better with a little bit of supervision there.
Because keeping muscle mass as we age is a really important thing to do. It's important for balance. It's important for being, having movement, being happening. It's important for a lot of different things. So we have, there are nutrient uh, There are things that nutrients do that we may not think about. And so I 100% agree with Ashley that getting some supervision on it is a really good thing. 26 times in a row. That's really something.
It's dedication.
Definitely, definitely. All right. Then we have a question from Robin. I'm a 68-year-old woman and have fasted on and off for many years, including a 7-day water fast 3 times a year. Now I eat within an 8-hour window and do Prolon fast 3 to 4 times a year. I've been told that I should eat some protein within an hour of waking and only do a 12 to 14-hour fast since longer fasts raise cortisol. Curious about your thoughts.
Yes. Well, I'm excited to hear that you're a regular Prolon user. And it sounds like you're doing a lot of different things to have a positive impact on your health. I encourage more of a circadian fast, like trying to eat within a 12-hour window every day, but then trying not to eat a couple hours before bedtime so that digestion can occur and then you can kind of get into a good circadian rhythm with your sleep and your digestion all together. But some people find benefits for themselves. Everybody's different. I do think having your own set of data, knowing your own genes and working with somebody that's looking just at you because you are unique and what your needs are unique too. But some people do well on a shorter fast, but others don't. And they have that kind of cortisol, and maybe they're not eating enough, or maybe they're not getting a well balanced amount of nutrients in that 8-hour window. Sometimes people just think if I just eat the same stuff I'm always eating, but in that window, that makes all the difference. But we want to have good quality foods. To me, I stress quality tops all of the food. So having variety of fruits and vegetables, having protein, having complex carbohydrate, they all have value for your body. So I think you can continue to do that fast, but I do personally encourage more of a 12-12 than a smaller eating window for long term, for sustainability.
And the other thing is that there's variability in how people do with eating different things at different times of day. I think that a lot of times what we hear is um, to eat your carbs in the morning and not at night. Some people can't have a really hard time with that. For some people, their blood sugar and their cortisol will go up if they eat too close to bed. For some people, it goes up if they don't eat close enough to bed. So it's really this is where genetics and knowing your own body and paying attention and honoring that really is important. Okay. Um, we have a question from Robin. I have done Prolon twice, and my ketones rarely go above zero point 0.8. Sorry, I had a glasses glitch, which makes me feel I am not getting the benefits of autophagy. Would you like to address that?
Sure, it's a great question. So that comes up because I have people that have keto mochos and they're looking at their CGMs and like, gosh, it's not working for me. I mean, the truth is we can't see exactly when autophagy happens, but that new study shows us and it was a good study looking at day 3. But as I mentioned, it varies a little bit based on body composition. But it's not about ketosis. It's a mild state of ketosis that you're in. So I wouldn't stress about that so much, but it's that kind of rejuvenation and renewal that happens on the 3rd day. So I wouldn't worry so much about it. Sounds like you are getting into a little bit, but it doesn't have to be high. In fact, we don't want it to be high on the body anyway. So it's I wouldn't stress about that.
Even, with our de-aging premium, we're going to recommend a certain number of days that you wait after finishing the Prolon
Mhm.
fast before you do the test, so that you've already had some refeeding happening, because that's going to be important. I would imagine that if the body thinks that it's super hungry, um, that it might skew the results. You wouldn't want to do it during the test. You would want to do it probably 10 days, I'm guessing, after you've been refeeding your body with food after doing the fast. So the good news is, even if the ketones are not doing exactly what you expected, it sounds like it's still working, and you have a way of monitoring that with our tests. So it's very exciting. Um, Laura just asks, especially for women in menopause. Um, I don't I don't know what this was in reference to, but maybe you can talk about if there are any differences in terms of
Like timing,
yeah,
fasting with menstrual cycle, do you
yeah,
think that's the question, perhaps? Because I hear that question a lot too. Most people fast better in those first 2 weeks just after menses because leading up to it, our hunger hormones are, that changes a little bit. We tend to have more cravings right before we're about to start our menstrual cycle. So when I'm working with women, a lot of times I'll encourage those 2 days, but I've heard both. I actually think I saw in the chat somebody mentioned Dr. Mindy Peltz's name. Um, and I don't know offhand what she recommends, but that's what I usually encourage for just optimizing the ease of fasting. So that a lot of times it's easier to go through those days. There's not as many mood swings and again, the hunger component right there.
perfect. So we have a question from Shelley, which I think part of it is for me, but she's asking if we'd recommend all adults complete the Prolon program, and I would, for myself, I would probably not say all adults should ever do anything, just because um, everyone is different and everyone needs to be evaluated for the individual that they are. And it's okay if you have a different answer, Ashley, if you could, because you have seen a lot more people do Prolon than do the fast mimicking diet than I have. That's just my sort of standard answer is
Sure.
nothing is for everyone.
Right.
But
I totally agree with you. I mean, we have some exclusion criteria. It's not one size fits all. There are people that it might not be appropriate for. One being allergies. I didn't bring this up. I did say that it's gluten-free, dairy-free. Um, but if you have nut allergies, there are nuts within the product. So that would be an exclusion criteria. There's a couple of other things there. We don't want you to do it if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, of course, as calorie needs are different. And, um, if you've had a recent MI, or there's several different things that we want to be, just cautious with, um, in order to proceed. So if you're unsure, I would go online, whether it's El Nutra Health or if it's prolonlife.com, and you can look in the FAQs there for any exclusion criteria. Kidney function, I knew there was one off the top of my head. If you have a creatinine clearance less than 30, that would be another reason why we would discourage it. So, and I've had some people try it and it doesn't feel right for them. And that's okay. It's not a one solution is the only solution for you, but it is a really fantastic interventional tool to help improve your health, but it might not be right for everybody.
right, thank you. And then Shelley was also asking, did you say the next gen version tasted better because the liquids were already mixed? I don't know if that's the reason, but I do find that the next gen tastes better. But that said, I've done the other one tons of times. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. But I personally find the next gen to be tastier. I don't. Ashley, you've now done the next gen, so you can
Yes,
speak to
I've
this as
done
well.
several. Yes, several of these. The next gen, I don't know why it does feel like a little bit more volume to me. Of course, you can customize, the dehydrated soups and customize the amount of volume that you add. Most of them kind of vary from 200 milliliters to 250 milliliters, but um, I think just the fact that they're rehydrated, the texture is better. You can get a good texture on the stovetop. It is not easy with some of the soups. Like the tomato soup would be one you could just pour like hot water from a tea kettle in and be totally fine. But some of the others that may have black beans in them, or maybe the minestrone that has some vegetables, it takes a little while for those vegetables to soften so that it feels more normal. And that is a benefit with the ready to eat. They're rehydrated. They're just ready to go. You can just quickly heat them up. So there's also a few new flavors there. And one thing, oh, Dr. Steady, we were going to talk about this too, about the inulin. The ready to eat soups don't have the inulin in them that is in the the powdered soups. And some people prefer that, especially those that maybe have some GI challenges, maybe SIBO, maybe you've had some Crohn's or things like that. They do well with the ready to eat soups. But some people like the inulin soups because it keeps them feeling fuller a little longer. So there's some variants there, but I like them all. It's just a personal preference.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Um, uh, okay. I was going to go off about, about that, but I'm just not going to. Okay. This is a very our audience question to ask. Christy's asking, are the vitamins in the kit methylated?
Oh, I don't exactly know the answer to that question, and I would be happy to follow up with you if you wanted to email me. Of course, you could go on our website too and ask that question in the chat bot and get that answer, but I don't have it, and I apologize.
Would you say that the amounts in there are in the vitamins are fairly low relative to what someone might get in a multivitamin? Do you know what I'm saying?
I think they're similar. I think it's similar to just a regular multivitamin.
Okay.
Um, but again, I don't know those amounts off the top of my head. I
Okay.
should learn that and be able to speak to that. So thank you for pushing me to do it.
Well, and I should know that because I've done it a bunch of times, and I know that I looked into that when I was doing the fasting before, but I just can't remember the answer to it. So, um, okay, we have one last question, which is from Echo Lee. Dr. Gundry talks about the benefits of prebiotics in blunting hunger during fasting. Could you respond to that? I think we actually just sort of did a little bit.
Yes, and we generally ask people to pause any non-prescription supplements and medications. I mean, you could take a probiotic, but most people stop all supplements in the fast. So it's up to you if you want to continue it. Some people they feel like they need it. They're so used to taking it on a day-to-day basis. Um, but that's up to you.
Well, I think that she was saying prebiotic, so that would be
Oh,
like
prebiotic.
yeah,
Like the inulin and
yeah.
yes, 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 yes.
So
Yes, so that could be helpful for you with the ready to eat soups. I see what the question is now. Yes.
um any final thoughts for our wonderful audience before we wrap up? Because we've, as believe it or not, we are almost we're almost at
At
time.
time, there's been great questions. I am excited for you all to get the lab testing and then do the cycles of fasting and then do the lab testing again, kind of bookend that fasting time so you can see the cellular impact for yourself and bioage reduction. Know that in the future, should you wish to have some ongoing support, that is available to you at the dietitian and our programs too that are trained. With motivation and help with behavior change and things like that. But I would encourage you to try it. If you've never done anything like this, it can have a huge impact on your overall health.
Thank you so much for being here. And in fact, a couple of the people on Ashley's team are so excited about the testing and then doing the fasting and then doing the testing again that they're doing it. So there's excitement on both
Yeah,
sides of this partnership,
absolutely.
which is really great to see. So thank you all for being here. Our audience is wonderful as always, and Ashley, thank you so much for all of your expertise and it was also really fun. So
A pleasure to be here.
I will see you again on the
Yes.
24th. Ashley's going to be presenting at our She Summit on January 24th. So we get to see Ashley again. So we hope to see all of you there. Have a wonderful evening and thanks, everybody.
Thank you.